Hello everyone and welcome to Amy's Bookshelf. So today I am going to do my January wrap up. I've never filmed at night before, so I'm hoping this is going to look cosy. Although I do love natural light, but we're in February and there's just not that much of it, and I have busy days, so it's hard to find the time, so I'm going to film this in the evening. And yeah, just go through all the books I read in January. I've had a good start to the year. I read 10 books just in January. So yeah, very good. It was a mixed bag. I'll obviously go into a bit more detail, but some ups and downs, but some very good ups, so very happy about that. Yeah, so I'll go through them one by one. I'll leave in the description any links where you can buy them on bookshop.org as well. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. Okay, here they all are. Just need to sort them out into the order I actually read them in, so bear with me a second. Okay, I have sorted them all out. So yeah, like I said, there are 10. I'll go through them one by one, tell you a bit about what I thought and whether I'd recommend them. So we are starting off with a popular one, The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien. Now I famously, or I think famously, don't like fantasy and specifically don't like Lord of the Rings. Very happy for people that do. I know it's really popular, but I watched the films when I was, I don't know, a teenager. I just never got it, and I've attempted to read the first book because I have my mum's old copies and again didn't get it. But my lovely friend Kate, I'll put her handle down in the description below because she runs a great little shop with loads of like bookish and Disney and fandom pins and other little accessories, so check out her shop. But anyway, my lovely friend Kate loves Lord of the Rings and Tolkien in general, and she said when she came over just before Christmas, she said to me, Amy, I think you should read The Hobbit because it's much more digestible than Lord of the Rings. It's a children's book, so it's supposed to just be like this fun adventure story. It's not too long, so she was, yeah, trying to convince me to give it a go, and she said you should make it your first read of 2023, and I did make it my first read of 2023 because I already had a copy. Again, this is my mum's copy. I'm not actually sure if she's read it. I have a lot of my mum's old books that she doesn't want anymore, or didn't want anymore when I moved out, so I inherited this along with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But yeah, like I said, haven't read them and not really planning on reading them either. But anyway, I digress. So I gave this a go, and I actually ended up listening to half of it as an audiobook because I have a Scribd membership. I'll leave the link in my description because Scribd's really great. You get unlimited audiobooks for £10 a month, and you can get a 2-month free trial if you use the link in the description. But anyway, they had The Hobbit on there because when I do my monthly TBR baskets, if you follow me on Instagram, I have baskets, I'll put some pictures here, where basically I say to everyone, these are the books I'm going to read this month. I'm not 100% good at sticking to them. I often read most of them and then will either not get to all of them because I don't have time, or I'll read some other ones for various reasons, but I normally read most of what's in the basket that month. So when I set up the basket, I normally check out what's on Scribd because I do like reading audiobooks, and I also like having physical versions of them as well, because if you get in a bit of a slump or you're finding books tricky to get through for whatever reason, I find it really helpful to change the format, so listen to it as an audiobook or go back to the physical copy. So yeah, I always check out Scribd, and The Hobbit happened to be on there. And what's really cool about the narration that was on there is it is narrated by Andy Serkis, who, if you don't know, is the actor who voices Gollum. I was going to say Smaug then. No, that's Benedict Cumberbatch. No, Andy Serkis voices Gollum, so he generally is a good narrator because he's a very good actor, but there are some scenes in the book, if you haven't read The Hobbit, it's not really spoilers, but there are some scenes in The Hobbit with Gollum in them, and the interactions were fantastic because obviously it's not someone just doing an impression of Gollum, it's literally the person who created the character of Gollum. So I loved that, and that made me really, even though I don't like Lord of the Rings, it was just cool because obviously I know who Gollum is, everyone knows who Gollum is. So yeah, that was really cool. So I'd really recommend checking out the audiobook if you do want to give The Hobbit a go, or maybe if you've given it a go in the past and you didn't really like it but you want to try again. Listen to the audiobook, always a good way to just check if maybe a different format will help you read a book. So anyway, I've gone a bit on a tangent here, but The Hobbit, if you don't know, I'm probably going to do a very bad description of it, but obviously it's a fantasy novel. It's set in the world of Lord of the Rings. I'm not even sure what the world is called, to be perfectly honest. But it follows Bilbo Baggins, who is a hobbit, and he goes on an adventure. He goes on an adventure with a group of dwarves who have various funny names, and also Gandalf the wizard, who again I'm sure you'll recognise if you've either seen The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings or read them. Yeah, and it's basically just an adventure story, and it is really fun. I will definitely give it that. It is very easy to read. I wouldn't go into it thinking it's really easy to read like a children's book would be now, because it was written in, I think, 1920 or something like that. So because of the language, you know, that's 100 years ago, how our language has changed, I do think it's different to how a children's book would be written now, but it's still easy and straightforward enough to follow. I think some of the descriptions can get a bit lengthy, and just things can become a little bit wordy, which again is something you wouldn't necessarily have in a children's book now, because there would be more focus on making things really easy to understand. But I don't think you're going to get stuck with the descriptions like you would with the Lord of the Rings books. So yeah, I really did enjoy it. Like I said, I thought it was really fun. The fantasy wasn't too much for me. There was a point towards the end where I got a little bit confused. There were some new characters introduced. Obviously I won't spoil it, and at that point I did struggle to kind of keep track of where we were. But if you just go slowly and reread any bits you get confused, it's easy enough to catch up to where you were. So overall, pleasantly surprised. It's not convinced me to read the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but it has given me a little bit more of an appreciation for like the Tolkien world and just these books in general, and made me understand a little bit more why people love them so much. So thank you, Kate, for making me read it. And maybe one day I'll delve into the actual trilogy, but not anytime soon. Next up we have Mayflies by Andrew Hagen. Now this was recently adapted into a TV show on, I think it's on BBC One potentially, and my partner wanted to watch it, and I said I don't want to watch it yet because I want to read the book. So I promised him this would be in my January TBR basket so that I could read it, and yeah, and read it I did. So this is my second read of the year. And yeah, it was a really interesting book. I was going in expecting it to be kind of like Shuggy Bain by Douglas Stewart. If anybody has read that book, it's a really good book, quite emotional, difficult parts of it to read, but the storytelling was fantastic and the characterization, and I just loved the journey that the characters went on in those books. So I was kind of hoping for that, and I think it's probably my own fault here because they're both set in Scotland and the covers are kind of similar. So I thought they would be very similar, and they're not really that similar. They are in a very slight respect in that both of them are sort of coming of age stories, but Shuggy Bain is about a child growing up basically, and I can't remember the exact years, but it does cover quite a few years over Shuggy Bain's life, whereas Mayflies is set in two separate time periods with the same characters, but you don't really get the growth that you do in Shuggy Bain. You basically jump from one time to the other. So Mayflies is mainly two men, James and Tully, and it basically explores their friendship. So like I said, in the first time period it's kind of their childhood, their adolescence, explores their friendship, a bit about them. To be honest, the first part I found a bit slow. I didn't really get it. I didn't really love any of the characters, and I was a bit like, why do I care? But I knew there was a part two, and I'd heard other people say stick with it for part two, and I can confirm that if you are having the same issues as me, you should just stick to part two. It's not a very long book, so don't worry about, you know, having to really go through a slog. Just having a look. Yeah, so part one is set in 1986 and is about 130 pages long, and then part two is in 2017 and is about 140 pages, so it's nothing huge. So if you do find it a bit slow but you want to persevere, just stick with it, because I think part two really makes up for any kind of slowness in part one. So yeah, what I really loved about this is it was definitely a slow burn, and I think its strength really lies in the characters rather than the storyline, and the friendship between James and Tully by the end I think you really have a lot of love for. And it's a very like honest book, it's a very real book. There's a lot about sort of emotions, but in a very subtle way, in a way that probably says a lot about men talking about emotions in our society, and when big things happen in their lives and not being able to process those emotions, and not being able to rely on their friends like they really honestly would want to if they were being honest. So I really loved that for it, and the ending of the book is quite beautiful, and yeah, overall it's a bit of a tearjerker, but it is a really good book, so I would really recommend it, especially if you're looking for, like I said, slow burn, good characterization, good characters, and yeah, just something to get lost in for a little bit and go away with thinking of fondly. So yeah, I enjoyed that. I think I gave that, oh, I don't know if I said about The Hobbit, I gave that 4 stars, and I also gave Mayflies 4 stars because the first part was a little bit slow, so I couldn't completely love it. Okay, next up we have Less by Andrew Sean Greer. Now, I got this in a charity shop a while ago, like a good 2 years ago, I think, and I'd seen the cover in a lot of other places, so I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. And the back of it sounded interesting enough. Like I said, it was from a charity shop, so I wasn't spending the earth on it, so I thought, okay, I'll give it a go, and put it in my January TBR because frankly it's been sat on my shelf too long and I wanted it off my TBR and into my red shelf. That is figuratively, I don't literally have those shelves. Anyway, so Less is about a man called Arthur Less who feels like he's a bit of a failure, and an ex-boyfriend is getting married, and in order to avoid going to the wedding, he basically accepts invites to other events around the world because he's a writer, so he gets invited to various things. So he ends up on this kind of globe-trotting tour avoiding this wedding of his ex-boyfriends. Now, I really wanted to love the book. I think the premise sounded interesting. There were a lot of themes and a lot of ideas that I really wanted to be explored. The main character is gay, for example, and so there is a lot that I wanted it to explore about that part of the character's identity, but it didn't really go in the direction I wanted it to, and frankly I just didn't really get the book. It's definitely one of those books I walked away from thinking, I just don't think it was for me. And interestingly, when I posted it on my story, my Instagram story, and said that I didn't love it, a lot of people said the same thing. Mainly that they sorry, it's bookmark. Mainly that they wanted to love it, and they'd heard that, you know, it sounded interesting to them, but the follow through just wasn't there, and I have to completely agree. I think the writing was good. I think there probably needed to be more of it. I think there were definitely parts where I wanted to be spoon-fed a little bit more. It was a little bit too abstract, and I just couldn't stick with it. There was nothing to really get my teeth into, so overall I was a bit disappointed. It felt a bit lackluster, and to be honest I probably could have DNF'd it and it wouldn't really have bothered me. The only reason I think I didn't was because it wasn't too long, and I thought, well, the ending might make up for it, which it didn't, but oh well, at least I know that now. It's 261 pages, so it's not really long if you do want to stick with it, but I don't think it's worth it, frankly. So I gave that, I think, 2 stars, or maybe 3 if I was feeling generous. Okay, next up we have Bloom by Kevin Panetta and Savannah Ganucho. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. This is a graphic novel. I love a good graphic novel. I'll show you some pictures inside. It's all like blue and white and black illustrations, and it's really stunning. The illustrations are, yeah, quite amazing. So I'll just double check, but I believe, yeah, Kevin wrote the book and then Savannah is the illustrator for the book. And it's quite a chunky graphic novel, because some graphic novels are quite short. This one is quite chunky. Yeah, 350 pages-ish. So, you know, as graphic novels go, that is quite long, and I think it took me maybe an hour and a half to read it, which some graphic novels you can do a lot faster than that. But it was nice to sort of take a moment to appreciate the illustrations, because they really are stunning. I'll show you one of my favourite spreads from the book. So here you go. This one doesn't have any words on it, but it's just the 2 characters here kind of looking over the town that they live in. Yeah, it's really nice illustrations. So the story, it feels so basic to say, but I'll make the comparison. If you love Heartstopper, you will probably really like this book too. So Bloom is basically about 2 characters. The first one is Ari, who his parents run a bakery, and he lives in town. And then the second one is Hector, who comes into the town and comes into Ari's life, and they meet and romance blooms. That's all I'll say, because it is just a romance, kind of coming of age romance graphic novel, and like I said, if you like Heartstopper, you will definitely really like it. But yeah, overall it was really, really sweet, wholesome. I loved the illustrations, but also the interactions between the characters, the kind of romance between them. It wasn't perfect. I think in places it was definitely rushed, but it's quite hard with a graphic novel because you can't express everything you need to with all of the dialogue and stream of consciousness and, you know, all the narration that you would have in a normal novel. So I think you are restricted in that respect. And the gorgeous illustrations, I think, made up for any of parts of the storyline that I didn't love. I'm so glad that this is one I enjoyed, because I've been looking forward to reading it for quite a long time. So yeah, if you have any graphic novel recommendations, please let me know, because I'm always on the lookout. I don't own that many. I'm just looking at my little graphic novel shelf. I read The Girl from the Sea last year, who I also like that. That is a sapphic middle grade romance. I think it's middle grade, or maybe just on the cusp of young adult. And then The Sad Glows Club, I bought the second one of that and haven't read it yet, so looking forward to that. So yeah, if you have any graphic novel recommendations, please let me know. Anything like Bloom, I do like a romance, so anything like that. And yeah, I would really recommend Bloom if you're looking for romance or just any kind of graphic novel, because like I said, the illustrations are gorgeous. Okay, and then we have My Name is Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout. Now, Elizabeth Strout to me is an interesting author because I see her everywhere, but I couldn't really tell you what any of the books are about. And having now read Lucy Barton, I think some of the books are connected, because this one is obviously called My Name is Lucy Barton, and then there's another one called Oh William, and I think William is a character from Lucy Barton. So some of them are connected. But anyway, I was intrigued by this because I had heard about it, and I've heard about Elizabeth Strout, so I kind of wanted to know if it was one for me. I didn't really know anything going in. I kind of just bought it based on the popularity of the book, which is always interesting and a bit of a leap of faith. I'm still not 100% sure how much I liked it. I didn't dislike it. It wasn't like less. I did like it. I don't think I loved it. I think I was expecting it to go in a direction that it didn't go, and so that was a little bit disappointing to me, but obviously I can't really expect the author to know what's going in my mind and then put that on the page, so yeah, that's fair enough. So to be honest, it's a bit of a meandering novel. It's about Lucy recovering from an operation in hospital and basically just talking about her life, some of the interactions with her mother, and then kind of flashbacks to other parts of her life. So it doesn't really feel very like centered in any one point. It doesn't really have like a plot, as in, you know, like a Cinderella story arc or anything like that. Like I said, it's very meandering, which I did enjoy, and it's definitely a bit different to other novels that I read, which I always like a bit different. So yeah, like I said, I don't know if I loved it. However, I will definitely read more. Oh my god, there's sugar in this spine. I think I was eating a donut when I was reading this. Oops. Yeah, I did like the writing, so I think I'm going to read more Elizabeth Strout and hope that I like the other ones a little bit more. I'll probably start with O William because it's the same character, so that might help keep me grounded a little bit more in what's going on. But yeah, again, let me know if you have read any of hers, because like I said, she's very popular, so I would like to know what people who really love her think of it and convince me to read more. Okay, and then up next we have The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans. This I have been excited to read for forever. Quick caveat, which I think I mentioned when I spoke about this book last, but I was really disappointed by this cover. I really wanted to read this book and it took me ages to find it in a bookshop. And when I did, this is not the cover I wanted, which I know is really shallow and it doesn't matter, but I'll put the cover that I did want here and you can decide whether you think this one is nicer or this one is nicer. But anyway, it doesn't matter, the inside is the same. So this is a short story collection, and the premise is just really fascinating. So all of these stories are centered on either black or multiracial people, and they basically all focus on some part of American history in some way or another, either quite subtly or very on the nose, depending on the story. They're all a little bit different. And I think with all short story collections, I liked some more than others, which is the same, like I said, for any collection, so that wasn't surprising at all. If you have read it, then in particular I really liked I'm just looking for the contents to make sure I get the title right. I really liked the story Anything Could Disappear. That really resonated with me, and I thought it would make a really, really cool TV episode, like just a short, or maybe like a short film, because obviously it's only a short story, so there's really not much in it at all. But I really loved what that focused on. I can't really tell you anything about it because it does really spoil everything, because obviously it's only a short story, so there's just not much to it. I'll tell you right at the beginning. So it's basically about a woman on a bus, and she has an encounter with another woman who has a buggy and basically says, oh, can you watch my child while I go do something? I can't remember what it is. And anyway, this second woman then leaves and leaves the first woman with the buggy and the child. And it's basically the decisions she chooses to make after then. But yeah, I found it really, really fascinating. The other short story that I really loved was the self-titled one, The Office of Historical Corrections. So it's very much set in the real world, but it's basically where people's job is to literally correct history that has been wrongly told in wherever. So an example would be like on a plaque. If there was incorrect information on a plaque, then it would be someone's job to go along and literally correct the information on there. Or it could be like a sign in a shop or anything like that, and it's their job to go along and correct these parts of history. So it's really, really interesting, and like I said, it focuses on different parts of American history, which there's obviously a lot of commentary, a lot of like subtle undertones that I think you can choose to take away what you want from it, go deeply into it or go lightheartedly into it, whichever you choose. But yeah, the author Danielle Evans obviously has a lot to say, and I really loved the writing style, and I really loved how she was trying to convey her feelings and emotions through these stories. So yeah, I would really recommend it if you're looking for short stories. Like I said before, don't expect to love every single one of them, because you never do with short stories collections, but as long as you can find a couple that you like, then I think that's a win. Next up we have The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. This was this month's book club pick for my book club. If you would like to join my book club, then it is in the description. You can find the link, or just let me know if you have any questions. So this is definitely the longest book we've ever chosen for the book club. I think it's like 625 pages, so quite long for a book club, because obviously everyone needs to have read it by the end of the month, but most people did, so obviously we chose a good long book. Yeah, and while everybody didn't love it, most people did finish it, which I think is definitely a success. So The Rose Code is very popular, Kate Quinn is very popular, so I'm really glad it got chosen because I really wanted to read it. It is set in Bletchley Park during World War II, and it basically focuses on 3 women who work during the war at Bletchley Park. They each have different jobs, and they each can't really discuss their jobs with each other. They all live together for a period of time at the beginning of the war, and yeah, it's about the individual lives and jobs that they all live, but their relationship to each other as well, and the different things that goes on, and the different experiences they have all working in the same place while not doing the same thing. And yeah, each story really brought a different perspective to the novel, which I loved. And obviously being 3 women, it was really great to see what they did, like their efforts to help us win the war was really interesting, and just all of the kind of intricacies of having to have such a top secret job during a war. Like that's something that as a 26-year-old living in 2023 I can't really comprehend, but the fact that yeah, you have to keep secrets from your husband, from your best friend, from your mother, from yeah, whoever, because you literally can't tell anybody what you do, yeah, is sort of crazy. But yeah, it was really interesting, and obviously because Bletchley Park was real and obviously World War II was real, a lot of it is grounded in fact, and there's a character in particular, I won't spoil it because there's a description at the end which explains in more detail, but one of the characters is loosely based on a real person as well, so that was really cool. There are some kind of name drops. Prince Philip is in it a fair amount, which was a little bit divisive in my book club. Some people thought it wasn't necessary, but some people enjoyed that it was very much tied to real life, which made the book feel more real, which I kind of do have to agree with. Also Alan Turing gets a couple of look-ins, obviously because we're in Bletchley Park, so yeah, it was really interesting. It's a really well written story. I'm so convinced to read basically all of Kate Quinn's books because it was 650 pages and I could barely put it down, so I think that says enough about how much I love the book. So yeah, I would really recommend it. Even if you're not into World War II literature, I would really recommend it because this, I think, just has a different take. It's very much not in the middle of the fight, as it were, say, even though it was the fight, but you know, rather than the physical fight, it's all of the brain work that goes behind trying to win the war from that side. So yeah, really interesting for that, and would recommend it. I gave that one 5 stars. I can't remember if I've been saying stars for the rest of them. Apologies if I haven't. Okay, few more left. So next I read Fire Watching by Russ Thomas. This was recommended to me by my lovely friend Jazz from Travels in Fiction, and it is a thriller, and I listened to some of this as an audiobook again because it was on Scribd and I was doing some crochet and I wanted to do both, and I'm so glad that I did listen to some of it on an audiobook because there are moments in the book where there are phone calls, and the phone calls in the audiobook are done in this really cool way where like it literally sounds like someone on the phone, and there are also flashbacks, and again the flashbacks are told with this like echoey effect, so you can really, it's really obvious that you're in a flashback, which I loved because I think reading that on a page you can sometimes get a bit lost if you're not concentrating. Then you might get confused like, oh, are we in the present or are we in a flashback? But yeah, you definitely didn't have that confusion with the audiobook, so I love that. So basically it is a like detective police thriller, a kind of classic whodunit to be honest. So the protagonist, D.S. Adam Tyler, terrible with names, is basically involved in a case where they find a body behind the wall of a house when it is being knocked down, or the house is being redone, and they find a body behind the wall. So that kind of starts a series of events, triggers a series of events that D.S. Adam Tyler realises that he's closer to than he thinks he is. Yeah, that's kind of all the information I'll give you. There's a lot of fire motifs, hence why it's called Fire Watching. Fire becomes really relevant. Other bodies start appearing. Obviously, the tension ramps up, and overall, I thought it was really fantastic. Yeah, also, Adam Tyler is gay, and I thought that was really interesting too, because I think often thrillers, in particular, I think as a genre, is quite guilty of not being very diverse. As in, they're very much white protagonists. They're a lot of the time they're men and straight men, and I think it was really interesting just to have that kind of little added part of the book. Obviously, his sexuality is mentioned a lot and it does become relevant to the plot, but it's not something that's like overly sexualized or overly focused on for no good reason. So yeah, it was really interesting. I'm really glad that I read it, and I will definitely be reading more of this. I think there's definitely one more in this series, like the D.S. Adam Tyler series, but I'm not sure about any other books of Russ Thomas's, so I'll have to look into that. But I am convinced to read more because yeah, it was just a really gripping whodunit, which I really, really enjoy. So yeah, and also if you're like me and you don't really like scary things, then it's not the kind of thriller that, you know, will keep you up at night. It gets a bit graphic, it gets a bit gory, but it's not gory for the sake of blood or anything like that. So yeah, would recommend. I gave that one, I think I would give it 4.5 stars if I could on Goodreads. So probably round up to 5 to be nice. And I have 2 more left, one physical one and then one audiobook. So the penultimate book of the month was They, and I can't remember the name of the author, and my phone is there so I can't look it up, but I'll put the cover here and you can see who the author is. Now, I was wanting to listen to an audiobook while I was packing to go on holiday, so this was the day before my holiday, so I was looking for something really short, and I was going through the things I'd saved on Scribd, and this one was 2 hours long, so I thought, oh, that's perfect, I can do that while I'm tidying the house, while I'm packing up. And yeah, it had a really interesting sort of tagline to it. It was like the best lost dystopia or something like that, which I thought was really interesting. Like, that definitely intrigued me right from the get-go, so wanted to give it a go. So I listened to it, and overall it was very disappointing, and I think the general consensus from what I've seen on Goodreads and just heard from other people is that they also found it disappointing. Now, it's 2 hours long, it's a dystopia. You would hope there would be a substantial amount of world building with any dystopia. For example, the Hunger Games. You need to understand how we got to a point in society where everyone is in different districts, where the Hunger Games is a thing that happens every year, etc, etc. With They, that did not happen. We are very much plunged straight into the plot with no explanation, and then you kind of just have to hold on tight and hope that you vaguely understand what's going on, which I definitely did not. So yeah, it was really quite disappointing. I honestly can barely tell you anything about the plot apart from the fact it's a dystopia. It gets a bit graphic in places. I would especially say there's a trigger warning for like animal cruelty, so if that's something you don't want to read, I wouldn't recommend this one. But if anybody has read it and has like a good grasp on the plot, please let me know because I am very intrigued. What I do know about it is that it was first published, I think, in the 70s, and it went out of print really quickly. The author didn't make much money from it. It was written by a woman and very much shot down by men and the patriarchy, and and so it went out of print very quickly, but it was sort of rediscovered last year and published again, which I really love, and I'm glad that I've read it for that reason, to support it and to see what it was about. But yeah, like I said, just wasn't for me, and I really wanted more. I just wanted more. It didn't need to be so short. If I'd had like another hour of world building, of some more explanation, I could have been a little more invested, but I couldn't hold on tight enough to understand what was going on. So yeah, unfortunately it missed the mark, but it was only 2 hours, so nothing really lost. Okay, and the final book of the month, number 10, is Disability, Visibility, and it is a collection of essays that are edited by Alice Wong. So there are many authors in this, or writers or people who have contributed, but it's edited by Alice Wong. Now this again was recommended to me by Jazz from Travels in Fiction. Thank you, Jazz. Yeah, it was just really, she raved about it. She said it was really good, so I have been meaning to read it for a while, and it's been on my shelf for a few months, so I thought it was about time I picked it up. And I thought it was good to read a non-fiction this month as well, because everything else had been fiction. So yeah, like I said, this is a collection of essays, and it is all the contributors to the collection are disabled people, basically talking about the disabled experience and what it's like to live in our society as a disabled person. So the essays all sort of focus on different things, partially the disability that the people have, but actually often the disability isn't even mentioned. It's more about the experience that they've had living in very much in an able-bodied world, and yeah, like really eye-opening. In particular, there are two that I really enjoyed. I mean, I enjoyed all of them, to be honest, because they all had such diverse perspectives, which was, like I said, really eye-opening. But in particular, I really liked The Isolation of Being Deaf in Prison, which is by Jeremy Woody as told to Christy Thompson, and that is literally does what it says on the tin. It's about a person who is imprisoned and he is deaf, and that is just something, as someone who can hear, I've never really considered before, and how alienating it was for him to be deaf in prison, how none of the systems in prison are set up for deaf people, how he was very much dismissed and ostracised from a lot of the goings on activities in the prison, and also just kind of grouped together with other disabled people. So for example, blind, he would be in a cell with a blind person, which doesn't make any sense, and I think probably made his time in prison even harder than it already was. So yeah, like I said, really eye-opening in particular. And the other one I really enjoyed was The Anti-Abortion Bill You Aren't Hearing About, which is about which is by Rebecca Coakley, and basically talking about how saying that you are against an abortion bill isn't as cut and dry as you think it might be. So again, really eye-opening, really fascinating, and all of the essays just had such like strong voices, which I really loved, and like I said, really diverse group of people, all with different perspectives on the world, all also written in very different ways. Like there's a bit of poetry in the middle as well. Some of these are speeches that the people gave at various points, rather than like written essays that they've done specifically for this collection. So yeah, really worth a read, and just something you can probably dip in and out of as well, because the essays themselves are really short. There's a lot of contributors, so some of the essays are only 2 pages, so it's something that you can definitely dip in and out of if you don't want to read it all in one go, because non-fiction can be a little bit heavy sometimes. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I think this is a must read for everyone, to be honest. So if you're looking for a new non-fiction read, add Disability Visibility to your list. And I gave that 4 stars. Okay, and that is the end of my January wrap up. So like I said, 10 books, which I think is very good going. If I manage that every month this year, then I'll be doing very well. So yeah, let me know if you've read any of them, if you agree or disagree with what I've said. And like I said, I'll put any links in the description. And yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this. I hope the darkness wasn't too weird. I'll find out when I edit it. But yeah, I hope you liked this video. Please like it and please subscribe to my channel for more. I have some really exciting video ideas that I'm going to hopefully film very soon, so I'll get them out for you soon. And if you have any requests, then do let me know. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok. You can message me on there or email me. And yeah, hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Bye!